Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Today my guest is Jim Gale. Before I bring him on, I have just a couple of announcements. You can always get new episodes free on Rokfin, Odysee, and all podcast platforms. Check us out on Rokfin. This is where you get our premium content. And check out all the amazing podcasts on the Forbidden Knowledge Network. You can get them on our website, forbiddenknowledge.news. Follow our Facebook pages. Those links are in the description as well. And check out our merch store. You can get shirts, hoodies, stickers, mugs, and all kinds of awesome FKN gear. And finally, guys, go check out C60 Purple Power. It may be the most powerful antioxidant known to man. The benefits are amazing. I feel great, and you should too. Just click the link in the description. You get 10% off your order plus free shipping. Today, I want to welcome Jim Gale. At age 19, he first learned about the power of writing his goals. From the practice of inspired visioning, he became a 4-time All-American and national champion wrestler. He wrote his goals again at age 29, which included being retired in 3 years. He went on to create a mortgage company that reached $1.3 billion in sales in 3 years, leading him to an early retirement and the achievement of another life goal. He moved to Costa Rica to build eco-villages where he discovered permaculture. It changed his life, and he has realized he needed to bring it to every household in the world. The idea has become food forest abundance. He speaks about sovereignty, entrepreneurship, mindset, and freedom. Jim, welcome. How are you today?
I'm doing fantastic, Chris. How are you?
I am awesome. It's great to have you. And like I told you, you're doing some amazing work educating people about these things now. And they're more important now than ever, with the especially with the world we live in now and the aspects of the basically system crumbling right before our eyes. So we have a lot to get into, and I'd love to get into your work. Now, this is your first time that you're on the show. I'd love for you to tell us more about what brought you really down your path that you're on.
Yeah. So going back to when I first took the red pill, when I first learned that the world of governmente wasn't what I was programmed to believe that it was. And at the same time, I had previously done about $1.3 billion in total mortgage sales, total revenue. I had made some pretty good money. I was relatively what I thought of as free. And when then somebody said, Jim, you're a slave, I said, oh, fuck off. I'm not a slave. I can do anything I want. And then he said, can you work, and do you have to pay taxes to an entity that you do not agree with? And I thought, well, first of all, have to is the clue right there. It's the forced and violent exchange of value. And I vehemently, radically disagree with war. I disagree with mandating poisons. I disagree with every core of my being to a lot of the things that are out there right now. And so at the same time, I learned what was going on in the world. I was losing money because I had focused so intently on the problem. The law of attraction is a powerful mofo. And whatever we think begets the next thought, which begets the next thought. And I started contracting. I started having fear. Fear is the biggest control mechanism of the governmente, which means control the mind. And so I said, okay, after 2 years of going down that, I also, by the way, and this is the catalyst for the fear, is I had my first 2 daughters. And that completely changed my future perspective. It wasn't all about me. I would still jump in front of a speeding bullet or a train or anything to push them out of the way, even if I knew that it meant my own certain death. So when you start looking at the world through the eyes of your children, in my case, I had more fear because I didn't know what the solution was. But I'm an optimist. And I've read all the books. I've read this quote by Napoleon Hill, who says, whatever the mind of man can conceive and believe, it can achieve. And I said, is that really true? Because if that's really true, then I can conceive and I believe that we can create a world of radical freedom and radical abundance. So that's kind of how I got here.
Oh, and that's awesome. Now, in your bio, like I read, you started writing your goals at an early age and basically achieving them through that. Could you explain to the audience what that entails?
Absolutely. So, Dr. Gary Rushing, my wrestling coach in college, he said to the whole team, it's time to write your goals. Now, the 2 years previous, I had failed relative to my expectations miserably. And so when he had me write my goals, I was really just into partying and all that stuff. Yeah, I was in college at MSU in Minnesota, southern Minnesota, and I got home and I threw these 3 pages of blank fill in the blanks on my desk. I went and got really drunk. Next day, Saturday, I partied all day. Sunday came along and I saw the sheet on my desk and it said goals, right? Short term, long term, and intermediate, and all the different categories of how to achieve them. And I thought, shit, I got to get that done. It's for wrestling. And that was kind of my main thing in life. That was my identity because I was a failure at school. I got C's so I could wrestle. I was a failure in ways in pretty much every area of my life other than partying and wrestling. And so when I started to write, something twisted in my brain, something changed because I started looking at the future through a new lens, a lens that inspired me, that compelled me, that actually brought me forward into a new possible reality. And I ended up writing that I wanted to be a 3-time All-American and national champion. And when I handed my goals to the coach, he sat back and laughed and he smirked and he said, "These goals are kind of lofty, don't you think?" But it was too late because I already believed what I had written. And then I ended up being inducted in the Hall of Fame and was a 4-time All-American and national champ. So
Wow.
goals are important.
Yeah, man, that's really great. Now you were talking earlier about powers of positive thinking and manifestation, and I've witnessed this firsthand, as well as the powers of plant medicine, which you talk about as well, and ayahuasca. Now I've never personally used ayahuasca. I've used psilocybin, mushrooms, things of that nature, but I use it as a kind of like a spiritual or therapy tool. It's like having a little therapist in my head constantly whenever I'm, using it. But I'd like for you to talk about your experiences with ayahuasca and how this can be a transformative tool.
So the plants that are natural and illegal are the most important psychological medicines in our world today. And they're
Mm,
there by design, I believe.
here, here.
Some of the stuff I'm going to share are my belief systems, which are in a way filters for reality, and they're in a way not completely conscious. Most of the stuff I'm going to share is deep knowing. It is my belief system that this is a designed chemical, a natural God's medicine, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
Mother Ayahuasca, about the nature, psilocybin, cannabis,
Mm-hmm.
all of these things are natural. Now, when they become synthesized, and you add poisons to them, like happens to the heroines and the cocaines and all these different other things. Even
Right.
coca is a medicine, an incredible medicine, the poppy seed, all of these
Mm-hmm.
different things. But it's when it's added, when you add poisons to it,
Right.
that they become very destructive. So my first time on ayahuasca, I was going through this still a period of kind of trying to hold on to what I had
Mm-hmm.
instead of opening up to the possibility of more. And for the first time in years, I again felt connected at a deep level with spirit. And through that connection, I began to have the faith and the courage that I needed because I knew that I was more than this Jim Gale suit,
Yeah.
that I was spirit living this Jim Gale reality at the moment, but this is a
Right.
temporary experience. So I will be shortly going to an ayahuasca weekend ceremony. I haven't got it booked yet, but I know I can feel in my soul that it's time. I did on Independence Day. I was alone for the first time in years because I've got a brand new baby girl and a family and all sorts of stuff going on. I went out to Gauss Landing where we're building an off-grid community, and I sat on top of this mountain. I had a big psilocybin tea, and about an hour and a half in, I had a couple tokes on the pipe, and I experienced epic oneness with nature. I was surrounded by the jungle, and there's no words. And as you know, you've had psilocybin that you can't describe. There's no words that can describe the connection that we feel. Is that your
Yeah.
experience as well?
Oh yeah, definitely. And I've had plenty of profound experiences and life-changing experiences. But even like the most terrifying experiences that I've had, I come out learning something and being like, I'm glad I had that experience. So yeah, I think it's a profound medicine. Now I want to get into permaculture. For those that may not know, first of all, what is that?
So permaculture stands for originally for permanent agriculture, and it has evolved to stand for permanent culture. And it depends which circle you're in because it's a very decentralized agricultural design science. And so that's what it is. It's a way of designing systems, mimicking natural systems that provide an incredible abundance of food at literally zero maintenance, if you want it to be zero maintenance. Now, to increase yield, you can go prune the fruit trees and you can do some things like that. But the way, if you design it properly, you can literally set it and forget it, and it will provide food in an expansive way forever. In fact, there's one real quick story. One of my partners, Chad Johnson, up in northern Minnesota, because people in the north where I'm from, they're like, well, I can't grow that stuff here. Well, yeah, you can't grow a plant that's meant for the jungle in zone 9 or 10 there, but you've got tens of thousands of different plants that you can grow in your own yard that are right for the Minnesota climate. So anyway, Chad created this food forest over the last 5-6 years that is so abundant that it's expanding on its own. He has these raspberries around certain parts of his garden where there's 8-foot tall raspberry bushes that you can't see through.
Wow.
Deer, moose don't even walk through those raspberry bushes, right? And it's just incredible how many fruit are on those bushes. And the birds, and by the way, he has 300 different species of edible and medicinal plants there on his property, and probably a lot more, but those are the ones that he knows the names of. And the animals are coming in and they're eating the fruits and they're bringing those out into the woods. And he's estimated that his food forest design and install has produced thousands, if not tens of thousands, of new starts in the woods around his house.
Wow. We're looking at the times we're in now where we're witnessing crumbling and dying systems, and it's a great time to install systems that you don't have to have constant maintenance in these parallel structures instead of wasting time trying to rehabilitate dying systems, right?
Yes, exactly. And so to take this expansion one step further, it's good to understand what the problem is, because from the understanding of the problem, then you can work on the flip side, which is the solution. The problem are the poisons and the poison producers. The people that have for many generations known this one fact that Henry Kissinger spoke about. He said, if you want to control nations, control oil. If you want to control people, control food. If you want to control the world's currency, which is the stored energy of the people. It's a representation of the value we add to society. They do control all of those things. So the food piece is the one that you and I can absolutely change right in our backyards. It's so, as Bill Mollison said, though the problems of our world are increasingly complex, the solutions remain embarrassingly simple. And to turn your yard into an edible regenerative landscape is the most selfish thing you could do, because it's good for you on every level. It's also good for every piece of the puzzle, all the way up to the global society.
Now, would this be equally sustainable for every region and climate and every zone around the world?
It is absolutely. In permaculture, zone is job one. Now, there are some people like Sepp Holzer who's growing lemon trees in the Australian Alps where it gets way below zero. Now, you're not supposed to be able to grow lemon trees there, but he is a genius at design, and he's found ways using heat storage like rocks and the flow of water and the cycle of energy to do things that are beyond what most designers can yet do. And he's teaching that. So it's zone specific typically, where you have certain plant hardiness zones and you find the plants that live naturally in those zones.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's amazing. Now, what about for people that say they don't have any enough money to do this, they don't have enough resources to get into this? What would you tell them?
I would tell them that there's three levels of BS. There's bad science, belief systems, and bullshit. It's all programmed. And everybody listening to your show, we do not want to be programmed, right? So we have to recognize the program. Right? This idea that we have a brown thumb or a black thumb. Now, if I had more melanin, is that what's called melanin
Yeah.
in my skin, then I would have a brown thumb, right?
Right.
I don't. I happen to have less melanin. But my point is it's all just things that we say to ourselves, and those things are literally part of the programming. When Henry Kissinger was talking about it, it wasn't the ramblings of a psychopath. It was the strategy of the guy who's met with every president to implement the strategy of control, right? So all these ideas like growing a fruit tree, I'll take one peach tree as an example, right? If you put one peach tree guild in your yard, then at the bottom of the peach tree, you can have ginger and turmeric and potatoes and all sorts of tubers and root crops, right? And then the next layer up, you can even have mushrooms down there. You can have your herbaceous layer, your medicinal layer, and then smaller shrubs, bigger shrubs, and you can have a lot of berry bushes around that one peach tree. So in the space of one peach tree, you can forget about mowing the lawn. You can forget about poisoning the grass, and you can actually grow an amazing amount of food every single year with no maintenance. And again, you can increase the yield by doing, an hour's worth of maintenance every 6 months, but you don't even have to do that and you'll get a yield.
Now, you also, educate people about self-contained greenhouses. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. And this is on my path to understanding the embarrassingly simple solution that Bill Mollison talked about. I was trying all sorts of things. I developed the Permacube, which was a greenhouse that had incredible functionality, microgreens and aquaponics and hydroponics. I even had an electric LED light, bug zapper, that dropped the bugs into the fish tank. So the fish could be, so it's called stacking functions. When you take an element in the system and you put multiple functions to it. We needed light, so let's turn it into a bug zapper that feeds the fish, right? So I created all these greenhouses, but then I got some heavy criticism from this one particular guy named Jack. And I look at him and I'm very thankful to him, Jack Spirko, for saying that's just fucking stupid. and he didn't mince words. He just came at me hard. And I don't mind that. That's free consult. I'm like, thanks, Jack. You just changed my life. So what happened is I started asking the question, if somebody had $25,000 or $30,000 to invest, where is going to be their best return on investment that also aligns with natural systems? And that's when I put the greenhouses to the side. I'm still a big fan of functional, simple hoop houses and low-cost greenhouses. I'm no longer a fan of the $30,000 or the $50,000 backyard greenhouse, because with that same investment into the soil, the return is infinite.
Now, you also talk about creating and designing outdoor permaculture installations for like yard or patio situations as well.
Yes, that's what we do. The business model that we've put together is strategic to inspire and empower the most possible people. And in permaculture, you have zones, right? The zone closest to your house is zone 1. And that's where you want your things that you go out and get maybe every meal. You go grab one tomato or a cucumber or some basil or some, So when I look at zones from a bigger perspective or a wider lens, what is zone 1 in the world? Well, that's the suburban backyard. And there's 40 to 50 million acres of lawn just in the United States. It's the largest crop of any crop. It takes more human resources and more poisons than any other crop, and it does not provide a food yield. Now, is it beautiful? I don't mind the look of lawn. I don't hate lawns. What I disdain and what we need to do is create balance. And so people can still have their lawn. If we just turned 50% of your lawn into this regenerative landscape, that's less maintenance and will provide you epic return on investment. That's our job. That's what we want to and are inspiring around the world.
Now you also work with local nurseries, crews, and anyone with a capacity to get it all going, right?
Yes, that's the business model to scale globally. We created what's called a cooperative business model. Now, I spent about $250,000 getting a franchise business model ready. And at the end of it, I had a 244-page FDD, franchise disclosure document, and a 89-page operations manual. And it made me sick. I threw the whole pile of shit in the trash because every line in there represented a line of control, a line of fear, and it's exactly the opposite of what we are all about. We now have a 2-page document that speaks to the voluntary exchange of value. We have no patents, no NDAs, no non-competes. We invite people to work with us because of the value we provide them. And our internal core mission is to serve the cooperative by providing the marketing material, the business technology, and also inspired clients. And that's what I'm so thankful, Chris, for being on your show, because the more people we can inspire to take this next step and plant seeds, this is how we catalyze a shift in consciousness that leads to mass adoption, which is it's going to change the world in no time.
Among everything else that you're doing, you talked about this briefly a minute ago, how you're helping bring the animal and natural cycles into the picture to spread beyond, the specific property or yard that you're working with, right?
Yeah. Yes. And there's so many layers of BS around the animals. Like, for instance, spiders and snakes combined kill 11 people per year in the whole United States out of 330 million, right? So when you look at how fearful we are of spiders and snakes relative to how fearful we are of cancer and diabetes and heart disease, it's off the freaking charts compared to the fact that they don't kill hardly anybody. In fact, 11 people, I'm sure they were already pretty sick.
Yeah.
Right? So if we simply get rid of our fears and realize that spiders and snakes are part of a natural divine system, this idea of the snake in the Garden of Eden, and I love this analogy or this thought of the vision of the Garden of Eden. In fact, as Victor Hugo said, there's one thing more powerful, one thing stronger than all of the armies of the world. And that is an idea whose time has come. The Garden of Eden, which is a seed that's been planted within all of our psychologies, is literally the idea whose time has come.
One thing that I find awesome about what you're doing is if someone is forcing the population to do anything like forced vaccinations, anything out of fear, you don't work with them, right?
I do not. One of the first things that I ask every person is, first I share with them this. We choose not to work with people who advocate for force and violence. Now, when I say that, everybody says, what are you talking about? I don't advocate for force and violence. And then I say, okay, but sometimes I feel something different. So then I say, do you advocate for forced mandates of any kind? And if they say yes, then I explain to them that that's preemptive violence and that we do not support that or work with people who do. And that one thing has been the best business direction that I've ever experienced.
Right now we're seeing food shortages, we're seeing supply chain shortages, we're seeing all these things crumbling from, the results of the shutdown that we had and everything else amongst the agendas. How do you see things going in the next few years?
Well, I've read articles lately that there are more people gardening now than there have been for many, many years. More people are waking up. The one kind of I really don't live in the area anymore of fear or concern or worry or rage or pride or any of that bullshit. I really have intentionally, strategically elevated my consciousness to understand that this idea of faith and courage is kind of the lowest levels of consciousness, right? To trust in that there is something bigger. And so the one concern I have, though, is that maybe we didn't get going soon enough. Now, with that being said, we're spirit anyway. We get to play this game again, I believe. And so let's learn what we can learn. Let's use our intuition. Let's be guided by something over and above the programs and the thought processes that we already know. What was it? Einstein, who says imagination is more important than knowledge. For imagination, knowledge tells us what is, and imagination tells us what will be. When we can inspire this shift in resonance, like Tesla said, energy, frequency, and vibration, when we can raise our vibrations up to a level of faith and courage and joy and love, with the idea of the Garden of Eden, with the idea that we can be healthy and happy and free, we got it.
Do you see people kind of realizing how the system is poisoning them through our, basically everything, food, water, air, mainly our, food systems, the nutritional systems that are in place right now for the mainstream masses? Do you see that collapsing as well?
Well, yeah, completely. All this, it's a systemic failure of the system right now. And the powers that be are trying desperately to hold on to control. I think it was Goethe who said, none are more hopelessly enslaved than those who falsely believe they are free, right? So we are waking up. This is the age of Aquarius. This is the Great Awakening. This is the apocalypse, which means unmasking or lifting the veil. So and this is the game we're in. Are we going to wake up fast enough to stop the poison producers from destroying our world? Well, is all I can do is everything in my power to affect that change.
One of the big myths that's being perpetrated, I think it's a myth, but personally, is that the planet's overpopulated. What are your thoughts on that?
It's just insane. The whole thing is insane. If we used our resources wisely, if we used the human ore, if we used local regenerative landscapes, we could have literally infinite amount of people on this property. Yes, they'd have to be skyscrapers, and yes, we'd have to major transform, but we simply aren't using our resources wisely. Our food to table right now in the United States is 1,500 miles when it should be 150 feet on average. So that whole thing is part of the control narrative. And that control narrative has led to academics and movie stars and influencers, even though they know that this is an agenda being carried out. It's not what they say it is on the television programming, right? They'll still go along with it because they do believe that global warming and climate change and overpopulation is something that we have to depopulate the world. And that's why, Billy G stood up on stage and said, if we do a good job with this vaccine, we can depopulate the world by 10 to 15%. Right? So then the solution again is decentralizing, is taking our power back. Instead of the programming, we have to free our minds from the governmente, and then we can create this epic world.
Now, you mentioned global warming. What are your thoughts about any type of, food shortages or things of that nature due to the changes on our planet? There are, cosmic changes going on, but it's, of course, I don't think because of what we're doing as a species. I think it may be something that's always, a cyclical thing that's always happened. But as far as what's happening with our massive food supply now, do you think that has anything to do with climate change or anything of that nature?
So what I have come to believe I trust the people who aren't funded by the governmente to give information at the risk of their jobs and of their lives. That's who I trust more than the people who've gotten funded by the same entities that create the poisons. Now, when you unpack that a little bit and you think about, wait a minute, The same entities that are saying that we need to do this are also the ones that are mandating poisons. There's something wrong there. And it's kind of easy to see that if you step back and go, holy shit. So yes, I believe we're going into a grand solar minimum. I believe it's a natural cycle. And I'm not saying that humans aren't destroying our planet. We are, but it's a top-down destruction. It's a destruction of the spirit, of the mind that is creating these problems. And that's why it's our job, our duty, my joyful obsession to help people see past the illusion into what's possible and therefore live inspired lives of regeneration and love and abundance.
Right. Now, you mentioned something that I've actually been talking about a while is your perspective and your point of view, how it can affect everything in your life. And I see that there's two different, basically, timelines or schools of thinking right now. There's this panicky school of thinking that we're in some sort of pandemic and people are actually dropping dead from this, and you have to be forced to go get some jab if you want to work and fly and do all these things, and it's a world of fear. And then they have people like yourself and myself who are waking up to a beautiful day, going about their day, there's nothing wrong, everything's fine in their world. So there seems to be this split in like reality and timelines. Do you see it ever coming back to one where we can kind of live harmoniously and not have to live in two different worlds of fear or just love, basically?
I see such a major transition happening. The people that will stay with fear aren't going to make it. They're going to die because fear is a contraction of the spirit of health, of abundance, right? So the longer we're in fear, the faster we die. Fear is the ultimate thing to fear. Was it Franklin or Churchill? I've heard both. But anyway, nothing to fear but fear itself, right? Or Roosevelt. Anyway, so I do think that the end game, the Hollywood, by the way, they've been controlled by the CIA for a long time. That's out. CIA funded James Bond and all this stuff. So I think that this predictive programming that we see, I think it's right on. I think that a lot of people aren't going to make it. Again, the only thing I can do is inspire as many people as possible out of that fear grid, that control mechanism.
Talk about the medical system and pharmaceuticals and things of that nature. Do you see this as another failing system in the future, to where we won't have to rely on, doctors forcing pharmaceuticals down our throats just as a band-aid solution instead of looking at nutrition and the root problems of bad health?
All unsustainable systems fail, 100%. So absolutely it will fail. The question is, will we rise above it? Will it fail because we turn our back and our energy and our focus from that poison system towards life? Or will it fail because the whole system comes down? That's what we're trying to affect, is the first one, where we just turn our energy, thanks to the wisdom that we're conveying to the world. And this is so interesting, how when you mimic God's systems. Now, I'm not pretending to know what God is, and I definitely don't think God is some white-haired guy in the sky, right? But when we mimic these natural systems that come from an amazing infinite intelligence, then we can have everything that our minds can conceive and believe.
For sure. Now, as of lately, even especially the past few years, I've become extremely more disappointed in our medical industry and the people who took their Hippocratic oath, and the people who are in these industries that aren't speaking out and aren't doing more to show that they are not standing with tyranny and the things that are happening right now. Do you think that we're going to see more people in the healthcare industry come out and either quit their jobs because of this or take a stand? I think that's the only way we're going to see any changes going forward.
Yeah. Do you know in Star Wars, one of the last ones that I saw a while back, where two of the stormtroopers actually woke up, switched sides, and because of them, the good side won, right? Absolutely. That's happening on a daily basis. I would say that to use the word millions might not be an over exaggeration. Like literally millions of people, maybe a week or a month, are waking up to this insanity. And many of them are at a high level. Like I like Russell Brand, for instance. Like that guy used to be like a Bernie Madoff socialist guy with good
Right.
intentions. You could tell that he had, at least, I might be wrong, but I think he had pretty good intentions. Now he's going out and calling these people out by name and going after them. So we can actually witness the expansion of consciousness. And it's such a beautiful thing.
Now, for those that would be interested in getting involved with some of this stuff, and like I was saying, they may not have much money to have a start. What would be some of the first steps that they can do to get involved with this?
So I thank you for that, because a lot of people think that it's going to be outside of their budget, outside of their realm of understanding to grow food. And I'm going to share a couple interesting tidbits that might change that belief system. So if you don't have any extra money, maybe a $2 extra where you can buy organic produce instead of the poison produced produce, then you can go to the store and you can buy your favorite ripe tomatoes and cucumbers and squash and different plants, even potatoes and sweet potatoes. And you can use the seeds. You can eat the plants and then you can use the seeds, and you can literally within a few years have a monster garden. And not only just a garden, but the amount of seeds that come out of one cucumber that can produce each one of them 20, 30, 40 more cucumbers. It's infinite almost, right? So you don't need any money. You just need the desire, and you need to take action steps and plant seeds. Now, on the flip side of that, if you want to speed up time, that's what we do. Permaculture is a way to speed up time. So we have a process through our Food Forest Cooperative and our Food Forest Abundance. In the design process is job one. It's like when you're building a house, you first get the architect. You hire the architect designs the house according to your liking. And then the next step is the installation. So we create what's called a food forest blueprint, which is a 45-page document that lays out all of the details needed for you to have a food forest in your backyard. Then you can either DIY your own food forest, or you can have one of our cooperatives put it in all for you.
For people that are looking around for seeds right now, is there any recommendations for some of the best places to acquire seeds?
So locally, and seeds and plants that are, of course, grown without poisons is best. Now, when I buy a fruit tree, sometimes because the market demand is high and the supply is low, I'll go to Home Depot and I'll buy a fruit tree. And then I will grow that fruit tree using natural systems. I will put layers of soil. I'll put worm castings in there and maybe some soil amendments. And I'll put 4 inches of mulch on top of the soil to protect it from the sun and the wind and the rain. And then the likelihood of that fruit tree producing an incredible yield over time is in the 90+ percentile. Whereas sometimes people go to Home Depot, dig a hole, put some cow manure around it, stick a tree in the ground, and that's it. And then the likelihood might be 60 or 70%, and the yield might be 50% of the yield that it could be with a tiny bit of extra design.
What else should we let the people know if they're, interested in getting involved with this? Is there anything else important you think that we should talk about?
Yes, I just a couple things this is as a business model. If you want to be in the business of helping people grow food, you can do it on your own. You could go on YouTube. You could take a permaculture class from any permaculturist in the world, and you can start immediately. Or you could work with us, and we have this cooperative model already laid out and going global. We launched 6 months ago on Earth Day. And we are now in 15 countries, maybe 16 or 17 now over the last couple of weeks. We just opened up New Zealand, Australia, Germany, and all the states, or most of the states anyway. And you can be in the business with us where we can support you through the process. It's like landscaping. right? But it's easier. There's no hardscapes, there's no concrete, or we dig holes and we put food in the ground based on the design principles of the permaculture science. I love to look forward, to write a list of positive things in your life and take steps very strategically and intentionally towards what you love about life instead of fear. In fact, if you watch CNN or Fox or any of this stuff, turn that shit off.
Yeah.
Right? Go outside, look at nature, be with nature, stand on the ground, enjoy natural systems, and your life will change overnight. It's really amazing what can happen. And my email, it's jim@foodforestabundance.com, and or you can look at our website, foodforestabundance.com. And if you want to take any part of our business model, you can steal everything except for our brand. That's ours. Everything else is yours. Like you want to compete with us? Great. We would rather collaborate, but we would also be happy to inspire competition.
That's great. Jim, thank you so much. Before you head out, if people want to find out more about what you're doing, give them your website and any other ways like social media, stuff like that.
Awesome. So Food Forest Abundance is going all over the place. In fact, a little miraculous story real quick. We launched, and about a month later, I get a call from the Crocodile Hunter. Was my favorite TV show for like 10 years of my life. The producer of the Crocodile Hunter called me up and said, Jim, we'd like to shine a light on you and your vision for society and build me as the Steve Irwin of permaculture, right? So that was a month after the show, Del Bigtree's show on the Highwire launch. 2 days after that, I get a call from one of my favorite actors of all time. And we just finished a pilot that is going to inspire millions. So the magic, it's just absolutely insane what's happening in such a good way. So if you want to be part of this energy and this movement, we would sure love to talk with you.
That's awesome. All right, Jim, thank you so much for coming on, and I'd love to talk to you again in the future.
Awesome, Chris. Me too. Thank you.
All right, till next time, everyone, have an excellent evening. We'll talk again tomorrow.